hand straight over now to Tim and Walton. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan, and thanks to all you for being here. So today, Tim will probably explain a little more, but we're not going to do a story. Tim is going to share some thoughts on some topics, and it's really about, I think, really about sort of the nature of consciousness, and talking a little bit about the difference between kind of an indigenous connected consciousness and the kind of separated consciousness that we've all grown up in, and it's been part of our world for a long time. So to kick that off, I'm going to read a William Stafford poem. This is called A Story That Could Be True. If you were exchanged in the cradle and your real mother died without ever telling the story, then no one knows your name. And somewhere in the world, your father is lost and needs you, but you are far away. He can never find how true you are, how ready. When the great wind comes and the robberies of the rain, you stand in the corner shivering. The people who go by, you wonder at their calm. They miss the whisper that runs any day in your mind. Who are you really, wanderer? And the answer you have to give, no matter how dark and cold the world around you is, maybe I'm a king.
That's one of my favorite William Stafford poems. I actually met William Stafford 40 years ago. What a delight. It was just delightful. But only for about 15 minutes after hearing him read. I wanted to share some things. As elders, it's not just simply telling stories and talking about stories. And I've taken my cues from a number of indigenous people that I've met. I've noticed that over the last few years, a lot of indigenous people are actually using these tools. They're using the YouTube and using Zoom. So I don't feel the hesitation that I felt early on to share some of this through this medium. A few years ago, Walton and I were both reading this book called The Memory Code. What I specifically remember about that was how Stonehenge was suspected to be where the elders would meet and everyone would be at whatever stage of consciousness they were at. They would meet and they would spend time down in the low, what we would call the moat. And each area was designated. And there would be cues on the stone. And they would use the stones as mnemonic devices. That got me thinking, what are our mnemonic devices? Because I have an interest in cave paintings and petroglyphs and pictographs, I was trying to put the two together. And one of the things that I thought of was universally there is a spiral. It's drawn on caves. I know I've seen them, petroglyphs from your continent. I've seen in all over Europe and here in the United States, in the Americas. And so I would like each of us to do this first. I would like you to take your finger and I would like you to move it sunwise, the way the sun moves around. So you guys will probably go in an opposite direction of me to start with. So if you go sunwise and continue going up, continue going up until you're looking underneath it. You're no longer sunwise. And now come back down. And we're back to sunwise. That spiral, the spiral form is connecting us here in the northern hemisphere with you in the southern hemisphere, because we were going sunwise. There's a universality in the spiral. And you can find this everywhere. At every continent, there's a universality there. One of the other universal pictographs and paintings, cave paintings, is the hand. I've jumped ahead of myself. Nathan, could you put up number 1, the first picture? Here's the cave painting from Lascaux. This cave painting is telling a story. We don't know what the story is, but we can assume what this is. We can make assumptions according to our personal experience. It's possible that these two figures were drawn at different times, but clearly the human figure is male. We could spend hours talking about this story. And if we were in that little moat by Stonehenge, we're in a little cave, the one where Nathan sits and does his little videos and rests himself. We had a place where, as men, we could gather and share what we know. We talk about things like this. What does this mean for you? What does this mean for me? How would the old men talk with the young guys? How would all that fit? There's a universality in storytelling among men and in sharing deeper secrets. Take this one off at this time now, Nathan. Thank you. One of the reasons that I picked this is because it is a story. I've actually been writing poems about cave paintings. And so I have a number of stories about cave paintings, but it triggers something deep inside of me. This was from 15,000 years ago. Would you put up picture number 2, Nathan? This next one, this photograph actually was taken just about a month ago by my cousin's husband. And this is in Utah, in the dry canyon lands. And this indigenous culture is assumed to only be about 1,000 years old or so. But they were doing the same thing on rocks, telling stories, using symbols to share information that's both spiritual, it's both interior and exterior. Just as that last picture had the bull stabbed with a lance and its guts spilling out, there's both internal and external stories that go with that kind of hunt. There are thousands upon thousands of petroglyphs in Utah, in this area. But there is a universal urge among men to do these kind of things. Now, if we can go to picture number 3. This picture is the hand. This picture here is from Minnesota. I first saw this 40 years ago when I was a cattle inspector in southern Minnesota. And I came upon this area by accident. When I first saw it, it was just in a field with a little box, little description of what was going on. They've done a lot more work on this area. The It has a huge historical museum there, Jeffers petroglyphs. But this hand was drawn by a man 6,000 to 7,000 years ago. Drawn and then chipped out. What happens when we put our hand on the ground or on the cave? It connects us to the earth, directly connects us. It's no longer merely an intellectual exercise. It's a physical exercise. We are at the interface of our internal life, the life of the earth, and the physical external life that connects us both. The hand. And this is a man's hand. And the reason I know it's a man's hand is because the ring finger is longer than the index finger. Generally speaking, for women, the ring finger is usually shorter than the index finger. We know that this is probably a man's hand. There's something in us that wants to connect perpetually with the earth. That's what this hand is doing. That's my interpretation. This is from 6,000, 7,000 years ago, from what the scientists are telling us. I don't know if that's true or not. It doesn't matter. I study all of these things as a poet, not as a scientist. The language that I've used and I've studied with is from a poetic orientation, not from a scientific orientation, because I'm concerned about the interface of the physical world and the internal world, the soul world, not necessarily the scientific world. Now, the words I give you about these things, these little stories, they're my interpretations. You may have another way of describing what's going on, different way for you to interface with the earth and with your internal being. That's just fine. As an older man, invited in, I feel the opportunity and the obligation to share how I view the world. I've been watching all of these YouTubes about native elders and how they share their knowledge. And it's been a curious study for me because scientific language doesn't come into the sharing. Sometimes they will utilize scientific language, but mostly it's poetic language. Poetic language. As we started 20 minutes ago, the thunderers are still thundering over my head. The thunder beings are here with us. That power, that force that comes with lightning. It's an amazing power. And when I hold up my hand, I'm greeting that power. I'm acknowledging that power. In the same way, when Tom came on at the beginning of this, he put his hand up to say, "Here I am. Greetings." We do that. We meet the earth. That's how we go forward. That's how we continue to live. Right now, there's an incredible push, a psychic push that says the world is going to end, so I might as well give up. Well, every time we go out of balance, we put our hand on the earth, on the stone. It gives us balance again. I want to just spend a few more minutes talking about this hand. Earlier this year, I was watching a Navajo elder talk about how they use the hand, and each finger represents one of our senses: sight, smell, taste, hearing, feeling. They use that, the hand, to teach about the senses. And then he said something that really struck me. He said, and between the fingers, there are 4 invisible senses. He says, but I can't talk about that unless we're in the Hogan. So that got me thinking, I'm too old to go out and try and make friends and gain their trust and have the Navajo tell me those Hogan secrets. That's not going to happen. It's also a few thousand miles away from my house. But I started thinking, okay, I've had an interesting life. I've studied poetry. I've studied religion, spirituality. I've raised families. What would invisible senses be? These senses of sight, hearing, taste, there's nothing moralistic about those senses. They're there. We're born with them. Is it possible that the invisible senses are also gifts of the soul that we're born with? I've come up with 4 invisible senses to describe this. Now, there may be many more, but I want to start with the first one, and I'm calling it intuition. And that's not the same as scientists use the word. Intuition is an awareness that accepts information, unfiltered information. For instance, dreams are information. ESP is part of that intuition. An example that all of us have these senses. I got to think about my own grandmother. During World War II, in the middle of the night, she woke up. She swore she heard her son, my uncle, calling from the window. She woke up, looked out the window. Well, it was the middle of the night, and he happened to be on a sub chaser in the Mediterranean Sea. The following year, when he returned home, she found out, when they compared notes, that his sub chaser had been torpedoed and he had been thrown into the Mediterranean Sea and had been calling for his mother. Her sense of intuition picked up that. Many people said, oh, that's just nuts. But I believe that there is that invisible sense. And when we get information, there's another sense. And that is our drive, our urge to live, our urge, which as it manifests and we become more familiar with it, it becomes our ambition. The negative aspect would be, as the Sufis call it, the nafs, the insatiable hunger for things. But that drive, it's there. It's always there. If you're alive, you want to stay alive. If the intuition starts in the east, like the rising sun, for us here, drive is the heat of the sun in the midday. So it'd be the south. The next invisible sense would be the sense of balance. The sense of balance is how we try and balance our life, balance ourselves in the physical dimension, try and balance good and bad as we move forward. That urge to get harmony and balance. And we all have that. Everyone has that in them. And if you watch young kids, why do they strive to walk with balance? Why do children feel comfortable and stable when they have a mother and a father and they feel comfortable there? There's a balance that they feel, male, female. And then the fourth invisible sense is the sense of reverence or awe. That ability, that sense of, oh, things are in balance, or isn't this beautiful? Wasn't that a wonderful thing that just happened? I just listened to the thunder. How wonderful that thunder was. We've been in a drought here. Things are working in balance, and I appreciate that balance. And with the reverence comes gratitude. That's all connected. And it's as if we have completed the circle. We've gone around the circle. Now, we're back at the beginning. New information comes in. That sense of intuition picks up new information. Maybe it's something to do with us personally. Maybe it's something we see outside. But that invisible sense starts it again. Oh, what was that dream about? I want to know what that dream was about. I want to know how that character in the story affects me, how it affects my life. That curiosity, that ambition, that drive. And then we move to the next. Say, well, if that ogre in that story is trying to destroy something, is it something that needs to be destroyed so we can get back to balance? And then we move on again. Oh, yes, there was some balance happening. Wasn't that wonderful? Isn't that amazing? This gift that we've been given to appreciate with wonder what life is giving us as we go around this circle. But it's not just a circle. It's a spiral. And it goes around and around and around and around. And in physics we know, or in electricity, let's say, we know that when you do a coil, the more times you create a coil, the more powerful the magnet. And it's the same thing with the soul. As individuals, the more times we go around this circle, the more we spiral around, the more we have experiences. We appreciate the power. We appreciate the wonder. Would you put up the fourth picture, Nathan? Again, it's the hand. We white guys don't have a history of indigenosity. We may have forgotten it. It may have been eliminated from us, but we're on the path. You guys wouldn't be in this circle if it wasn't already deep inside of us. This is a cave painting from Kosker Cave from 29,000 years ago. This comes out of Europe. So I know that my ancestors had the same urges, had the same sense of indigenous life that so many others have had. I went and found out that my Irish ancestors used to do sweats before battle all the time. It was part of their spiritual practices. I've given myself permission to know that I have an indigenous soul. And I just have to practice. And part of that is what we do here with stories. Part of it is how we share these deep, soulful conversations that we have. I don't think I should go on much longer. We only a short time today, but I just wanted to drop these ideas and these thoughts in. I'd like to finish with a poem. A small fire lifts the frost from my grandfather's faces. We're silent, sit close. All I see are their lighted faces. And I'm surprised to find I already know what they know. I've always known what they know. Now, I pay attention to what we know.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Walt.
Welcome.